Hey guys, welcome to BP The Bible Perspective. Critical race theory. Evangelicals' black problem. Yes, let's talk about it. Now, before we get into it, please like and share this video and subscribe to BP The Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comments section below. All comments are welcome. You know, a little over a year ago, most people never heard of critical race theory. And now it is blasted all over the airwaves as the most dangerous movement. So dangerous, it must be combated. It must be eradicated. These are just some of a few Christian YouTubers and Christian leaders who are saying that critical race theory is tearing apart churches. No, I'm just saying it's just the black problem. Well, this school board meeting, and I want you to see the acronym CRT, creating racial tension. And this is what people are saying about what critical race theory is doing, creating racial tensions. Now I'm going to get back to why it is saying that. However, these same people had no problem, or certainly did not feel the need to congregate and decry these kinds of events. Really? What was creating more racial tension? You remember these guys, the Charlotte marchers that President Trump said, very fine people on both sides. I challenge, show me one very fine person in these marchers. And yet what they show is white supremacy groups are up 800% since Obama took office, more since Trump, because these guys saw Trump as the great white hope that was going to restore the white culture. Which one is more dangerous? Critical race theories or these guys? Well, pastors, Christians. Now, remember, this is a Christian now movement. My focus is on Christian. However, we have to kind of go back and forth because Christians are not that far behind in the secular movement. Pastor John MacArthur has been one of the leading voices against social justice, critical race theory, Black Lives Matter. And he made this statement earlier this year. The social justice movement is the most dangerous movement. The most dangerous movement in the church. Now get this, within the last 100 years. He said that this year. The social justice movement is the most dangerous movement in the church within the last 100 years. My question is, more dangerous than this movement? You know, the January 6th movement that nearly decapitated our nation? Every white supremacy symbol is represented here, including the Christian church. This is not as dangerous. This is less dangerous than critical race theory. According to John MacArthur, it is. And that's odd coming from John MacArthur since he attended Bob Jones University in the 60s, within this last 100 years. Bob Jones University not only taught, but practiced segregation, saying it was God's will for segregation. It is against God's will for integration. Which one is more dangerous, critical race theory or the school he attended? The Southern Baptists, which he was associated with, and I think he still might be associated with the Southern Baptists. His church has got a different name, but I think he might still be considered within the social Baptist movement. Started under slavery, supporting slavery. You could be a Klansman and be a pastor in the Southern Baptists. So which movement is more dangerous? The Southern Baptists? And by the way, they still have race problems. It wasn't until 2007 that they finally said, you know what? churches, Southern Baptist churches, don't fly Confederate flags. Tell me which one is the most dangerous movement that he's a part of, that he's aligned with. I'm going to come back to his alignment. Because you see, remember, social justice, critical race theory, Black Lives Matter is just a black problem to these evangelicals. Now, this scene here, right? The good white folks stirred up over critical race theory. I showed you earlier the acronym, right? When they say that critical race theory is causing racial tensions. These groups of people meeting in schools to say we don't want critical race theory taught in our schools. The reason why these people are stirred up is from guys like these guys, James Lindsay and Christopher Rufo. They are teaching things about critical race theory that is just patently not true. In other words, they are misrepresenting what critical race theory is. And rarely, if ever, do you find these guys actually citing these guys. These are the actual architects of critical race theory. Derek Bell, Richard Delgado, and Kimberly Crenshaw. You rarely find them actually being cited. But if you go back and you read what they actually said, and by the way, let me just say this. I, as a Christian, do not believe critical race theory should be taught in churches. The Bible should be taught in churches. We can get to that later, though. In other words, that's another video that we have to really unpack. But the critical race theory basically is a law academic that is taught in law school. And it basically teaches, it is an analytical tool that examines where law intersects with racism. Why is that so demonized? See? So, for example, when you look at the George Floyd murder, critical race theory would analyze how racism and law intersects there. And there's a whole lot of other, of course, tenets of critical race theory. For the most part, these guys so misrepresent what they said, what they teach, that is why this group is so stirred up in arms with signs, ready to go to war. Well, here's another problem with critical race theory. Robin DiAngelo and Ibram Kendi is often cited. Now you have to say that the reason why, because Robin DiAngelo's teaching on white fragility really upsets groups like this, because she, as a white woman, really attacks their white fragility, right? And they're upset about that. They also talk about, and again, misrepresent Ibram Kendi's. But here is the problem. They are labeled as critical race theory people, and neither one of them are. Okay? Ibram Kendi himself says, I'm not a critical race theory person. But nevertheless, these guys oftentimes criticize and label them as critical race theory. Now let me just say, some of the stuff that you read with them, whether you agree with them or not, doesn't measure up to the condemnation and the misrepresentation that you see these guys pushing. Okay? And again, let me say, I don't agree with these guys, and I certainly don't, I mean, all what they say, but let me just say this. Tell me where they're wrong. Okay? Tell me what they teach is wrong. Now, what you hear people saying that they're teaching, and the same thing with Derek Bell and Richard Delgado and Kimberly Crenshaw, what they are teaching, tell me where they're wrong. Right? Let me just give you an example. If you say that the critical race theory, one of the tenets of critical race theory is that Racism is in the DNA of America. Is that wrong? Tell me how that's not wrong. And then cite the Constitution, right, that kept black people enslaved. All right. Look at these guys. These are Christians. Now, I've introduced you to John MacArthur, but Neil Shinvey and Vodi Bachman are one of the two Christian voices that have arisen now to combat critical race theory. Vodi Bachman has been teaching against things like not critical race theory, but social justice, and for years. And I'm gonna do a really, really special video on him because you need more time than what we have here. He recently got in trouble with his new book, Fault Lines, in which he was accused of plagiarism. Now, I don't care about plagiarism. I understand. I mean, look, he's dealt with it. He's apologized for it. But here is the more important issue to me that he did admit that is even more egregious than the plagiarism. That he admitted that he took certain certain statements, and kind of twisted what they said. But the way he explained it was, well, this is just the way I interpret what they said. So things like this, a statement like this, when he says that all he says, this is Vodi Bachman, and by the way, others too, but Vodi Bachman says that a Derek Bell, a Richard DeGaudio, or a Kimberly Crenshaw would say things like this, that all white people are incapable of doing righteous acts. Right? So that's pretty egregious, right? You're saying that all white people, so then you're able to really demonize that. But they didn't say that. If you go back and read what they said, they didn't say it. He admitted to misquoting them. But see, here is the problem. These people are all up in arms over stuff like that. That's the problem with what he had to say. See, in my opinion, he intentionally misquoted, mischaracterized, because it fit his narrative. Now, Neil Shinvey is kind of perplexing to me because he actually is a great researcher. But now he's kind of jumped on the bandwagon of the critical race theory. So my question is, why is it a black problem to them? Well, to me, here's my opinion. This is my takeaway. It sells books. It gets them appearances, paid appearances, right? And they're not bothered that white people are stirred up by that. That's my opinion. See, in other words, when you're able to use how people have been conditioned to see race, okay? How they've been conditioned to see race, and you're using that. And you're not telling the truth. Because here's what I'm going to tell you, that in both of these cases here, and what's interesting, that when you kind of go back, look at Neil Shinvey's picture here. You see him in a lot of these pictures. Why? Because he is making his rounds on all of these YouTuber shows. Right? And they all talk about critical race theory. Now let me tell you one other interesting thing about Neil Shinvey. He had a great exchange, a debate with this brother. Oh, I can't, and I'm sorry that I can't think of his name. He's a pastor out of Brooklyn. But Neil Shinvey did not, when you look at this, and I encourage you to do this, but I can't think of his name, but when you look at all of the other shows he's been on, because remember, a lot of these other shows, they have, to me, the same mentality. Critical race theory is the black problem that we need to talk about. Yet not one single person can tell me why the critical race theory is wrong. They mention the tenets, but tell me why they're wrong. Tell me how this nation wasn't racist, wasn't an oppressive nation, did not oppress and create oppressed groups. Tell me how that's wrong. But what they don't tell you also is, how do we deal with truly the racism? They, in other words, in all of this, they completely ignore the racism that still exists, that started, that was planted, and still exists in nation. As I told you, the Southern Baptist just in 2007 told his churches to stop flying the Confederate flags. See, the problem here is we're still dealing with racism, and CRT is just the boogeyman. It's just the black problem. And to some white evangelicals, we've always had a black problem. Look, guys, that is my perspective. I would love to hear what you have to say, and love to hear what you think. But don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought, a comment, add to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. Till next time, I'll see you then.